Welcome back to Stamps Old World UK, your ultimate destination for everything related to rare, vintage, and valuable postage stamps from across the globe. Today, we're diving deep into the fascinating world of stamp market values in today's dollar. Whether you're a seasoned collector, a curious beginner, or someone who stumbled upon a box of old stamps in your attic, this video will provide you with valuable insights into what your stamps might be worth in today's market. Make sure to stay tuned until the end as we reveal some of the most surprising sales from recent auctions and how you can determine the value of your own collection. To begin with, stamp collecting, or philately, is not just a hobby but a potential investment opportunity. The value of a stamp is determined by several factors including rarity, condition, age, historical significance, and demand. Stamps that are well preserved, feature printing errors, or were issued in limited quantities tend to fetch the highest prices at auctions. One example is the classic 1932 red 2-cent George Washington stamp, like the one you see on your screen. While common versions of this stamp are worth only a few cents, pristine or rare varieties with unique printing flaws can sell for hundreds, sometimes even thousands, of dollars. As of 2025, the stamp market continues to experience steady growth, especially for older stamps from the 19th and early 20th centuries. Stamps from this era, especially those featuring historical figures such as George Washington, Queen Victoria, or early colonial designs from British Empire territories, are increasingly in demand. For example, certain British penny blacks in mint condition have sold for over $5,000. Likewise, U.S. stamps from the early 1900s with misprints or commemorative themes can range anywhere from $100 to over $10,000 depending on their rarity and quality. So how can you determine the current market value of your stamps in today's dollars? First, you'll want to inspect the stamp for any damage or wear. Stamps with tears, heavy cancellations, or missing perforations will always be worth significantly less than those in mint or lightly used condition. Secondly, identify the stamp's origin, year of issue, and any special markings. Resources like the Scott Catalog or Stanley Gibbons Catalog are extremely helpful in identifying and pricing stamps based on these details. You can also use online stamp marketplaces such as eBay, Delcamp, and Hipstamp to research current selling prices and trends. Keep in mind that the listed prices are often optimistic, so look at sold listings to get a realistic view of what buyers are actually paying. Let's talk about auction trends and recent sales. One notable example is the sale of the British Guiana 1C Magenta, considered the world's rarest stamp, which fetched $8.3 million at auction. Although that's an extreme example, it demonstrates the high-end potential of stamp investing. More commonly, stamps like the 1918 inverted Jenny from the United States, which shows an upside-down airplane, continue to sell for between $150,000 and $1.5 million depending on condition and provenance. Even more accessible stamps like certain early Washington or Lincoln issues from the US, or early colonial stamps from India, Australia, and Canada, can bring in anywhere from $50 to several $1,000s if they're in good shape and rare varieties. Now, if you're new to stamp collecting or recently inherited a collection, here's what you can do to evaluate its potential value. First, separate the stamps by country and era. Look for any that are older than 1950 or seem to commemorate historical events. Next, research any stamps that look unusual, such as those with upside-down images, color shifts, or double prints. These are often considered error stamps and can be highly valuable. If you suspect you have something rare, it's worth getting it appraised by a professional philatelist or submitting it for certification through a recognized authority like the Philatelic Foundation or the American Philatelic Society. Let's also look at the influence of condition and grading. A stamp's grade is typically based on its centering, color, gum condition, and cancellation mark. Stamps that are mint never hinged or superb centered are far more valuable than those that are heavily used or off-center. For example, a 2-cent Washington stamp with perfect centering and original gum could be worth significantly more than a similar stamp that is poorly centered or heavily cancelled. Collectors today are increasingly willing to pay a premium for top-grade items, especially those that are graded and encapsulated by reputable services. At this point, you may be wondering, should I sell my valuable stamps now, or hold on to them? The answer depends on your goals. If you're a long-term collector, holding onto your rare stamps might increase their value over time, especially as interest in vintage collectibles continues to grow. However, if you're looking for immediate cash or want to downsize your collection, the current market is healthy, with many online platforms and auction houses providing a global reach. When selling, make sure to take high-quality photographs of your stamps and provide as much detail as possible. Transparency and accurate descriptions go a long way toward attracting serious buyers. Before we wrap up, here are a few tips for building a valuable stamp collection. Focus on quality over quantity. 10 high-grade rare stamps are often worth more than hundreds of common ones. Try to collect complete sets, especially commemorative issues or series from a specific time period or country. Keep your stamps in acid-free albums and away from direct sunlight to preserve their condition. And lastly, stay informed. Subscribe to philatelic magazines, join online forums, and follow auction results to keep your finger on the pulse of the stamp market. In conclusion, the value of stamps in today's market varies widely, from a few cents for common issues to thousands or even millions for rare and historic examples. Whether you're collecting for fun, history, or investment, understanding the factors that affect a stamp's value is key. Next up, the true market value of old stamps in today's dollar. Whether you're a lifelong collector or someone who has just discovered an old envelope or stamp album in a grandparent's attic, this video is your ultimate guide to understanding what your stamps may be worth, how market prices are evolving in 2025, and what collectors are truly willing to pay for historic pieces like the 1923 2-cent Warren G. Harding Memorial Stamp, which we'll explore in depth. From pricing techniques to expert tips on selling, identifying valuable items, and building a profitable collection, this will be one of the most comprehensive stamp value guides you'll find anywhere on the internet. Let's begin with a brief overview of what gives stamps their value. Not all old stamps are valuable, but some are worth a small fortune. Stamp prices are determined by a combination of rarity, demand, condition, historical significance, age, and sometimes errors in printing. While millions of people collected stamps during the 20th century, only a small fraction of those stamps today are truly rare or in pristine condition. However, those that are, like the 2-cent Black Harding Memorial Stamp issued shortly after President Warren G. Harding's death in 1923, can be highly collectible and sought after. This stamp was part of an emergency memorial issue and printed in haste, leading to some rare varieties and errors, including the coveted rotary press version, which can sell for hundreds or even thousands of dollars if certified. So what is the current market value of stamps like these in 2025? Let's break it down. A common 2-cent Harding stamp in circulated condition might fetch between 25 cents and a few dollars. However, a rotary press variety, especially if it is unused or has a light cancellation and perfect centering, can sell for anywhere from $200 to over $2,500, depending on the quality and certification status. This is where grading and authentication become crucial. Grading evaluates things like the centering of the image, the quality of the perforations, the freshness of the ink and gum, and whether the stamp has been hinged or disturbed. Collectors in today's market are increasingly looking for high-grade certified examples, and stamps that have been encapsulated or graded by expert authorities like the Philatelic Foundation or the American Philatelic Society often command premium prices at auction. Let's look at how pricing varies across different types of stamps and how the global stamp market is changing today. Over the past few years, we've seen significant appreciation in the value of classic British Empire issues, early United States commemoratives, and rare European and Asian stamps from the 19th century. For example, the iconic penny black, the world's first adhesive postage stamp from 1840, remains a top-tier collector's item. While heavily circulated versions might only sell for $100 to $300, mint condition or plate-specific penny blacks have sold for over $4,000 to $7,000. Similarly, early Indian postal stamps from the British Raj period, Chinese Cultural Revolution issues, and Japanese classics are experiencing growing demand from collectors, especially in emerging Asian markets where philately is booming. Now, back to American classics. Another common misconception is that all old stamps are valuable simply because they're old. Age alone is not the main factor. What makes a stamp valuable is its combination of rarity, historical context, and condition. Take for instance the inverted Jenny, a 24-cent airmail stamp from 1918 with a famous printing error where the airplane was printed upside down. This stamp, while technically old, became valuable because only 100 of the error stamps are known to exist. In today's market, one of these can sell for up to $1.5 million, depending on the condition. It's an extreme example, yes, but it's also a lesson. Always inspect your stamps carefully for anything unusual. Errors, misprints, color shifts, or unperforated edges can sometimes turn a common stamp into a hidden gem. So, how can you evaluate your stamps today? First, organize your collection by country and decade. Stamps from before 1940 tend to have higher collectible value, especially if they are in mint or lightly used condition. Second, invest in a good catalog like the Scott Catalog or Stanley Gibbons Catalog. These are the Bibles of the stamp world and include detailed pricing, issue dates, varieties, and known errors. Then, check recent sales on sites like eBay, Hipstamp, Delcamp, or auction houses like Cherrystone or Spink. Be sure to look at the sold prices, not just the listed prices, as sellers often overestimate the value. The true market value is always based on what someone is willing to pay. Let's also touch on the importance of proper storage and care, which directly affects value. Stamps should always be stored in acid-free albums or mounts. Avoid touching them with bare hands. Use stamp tongs to prevent oils from damaging the paper. Keep your collection away from sunlight, moisture, and extreme temperatures. A well-preserved collection is not only more enjoyable to view but far more valuable in the market. Even a common stamp can fetch 10 times the price if it's in perfect condition. And what if you're ready to sell your collection? There are several ways to go about it. You can approach local stamp dealers, but keep in mind that dealers will often offer wholesale prices. You can also list your stamps online, but this requires knowledge of pricing and photography. If you believe you have something rare or valuable, consider getting it appraised and then submitting it to an auction house. Many top-tier stamps fetch their highest values when sold at live or online auctions, especially if the stamp has documentation, provenance, or certification. Selling in thematic groups or complete series can also raise the value compared to selling one stamp at a time. Let's take a moment to look at current trends in 2025. As younger generations embrace collectibles with historical value, stamps are seeing a resurgence. Rare stamps are increasingly being seen not just as collectibles but as alternative investment assets, similar to coins, fine art, or vintage watches. With inflation and economic uncertainty, many investors are diversifying into tangible assets, and stamps with historical significance and certified rarity are a perfect fit. Digital platforms and AI-powered identification tools are also making it easier than ever to appraise, organize, and market your collection globally. In closing, the stamp market in 2025 remains vibrant, active, and full of opportunity. Whether you're holding a 2-cent George Washington or a 2-cent Harding Memorial issue, or perhaps an entire album of classic British colonial stamps, there is potential value, historically, sentimentally, and financially. Next up, the 2-cent red Washington stamp from the early 20th century. This stamp, featuring the left-facing profile of President George Washington, was a staple of everyday postage in the United States for many years, but what many people don't realize is that this common-looking stamp can sometimes be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars in today's market. That's right. While millions of these stamps were printed, some varieties are exceptionally rare and highly sought after by collectors all around the world. In this video, we'll explore everything you need to know about this stamp's background, how to identify valuable versions, and what its market value is today in 2025. To begin with, the 2-cent red Washington stamp was part of the Washington Franklin series, a collection of definitive stamps issued by the United States Postal Service between 1908 and 1923. These stamps were known for their similar designs, which often makes them tricky to identify without the right tools or knowledge. George Washington was featured prominently on the 2-cent denomination, used for domestic first-class letters, and over the years, multiple versions were printed using different presses, watermarks, and perforation techniques. Some of these differences are almost invisible to the untrained eye but make a world of difference in terms of market value. For example, the 2-cent Washington stamp printed using the flat plate method with a specific gauge of perforation and a rare watermark can be worth significantly more than its more common counterparts. So how do we evaluate the current dollar value of this stamp today? First, let's talk about the common versions. A used 2-cent Washington stamp from this series in average condition typically sells for between 10 cents and $2. However, if the stamp is in mint condition with original gum and no hinge marks, the value can increase to $5 to $20. But that's just the beginning. Some rare printings, such as those with a Type 1 rotary press print, a scarce perforation like 12 by 10, or a watermark variety like the double-line USPS watermark, can fetch anywhere from $200 to over $1,500, especially if graded and certified. The holy grail in this series would be one of the known rare misprints or unusual errors, such as an imperfect variety, a shifted design, or color misregistration. These are incredibly rare but have appeared in certified auctions and fetched values in the range of $2,000 to $10,000, depending on their condition and provenance. One famous example was a Type 3 rotary press printing on experimental paper, which sold for over $3,000 in a 2023 philatelic auction. What made it valuable was a combination of rarity, condition, and documented history. Another instance was a horizontal pair of imperforate 2-cent Washington stamps that sold for over $1,700. These are not items you'll find every day, but they are out there, in old collections, inherited albums, and dusty envelopes. That's why identifying the exact version of the stamp you have is absolutely critical. You need to look closely at the perforation count, use a watermark detector tray if possible, and consult catalog listings from Scott, Stanley Gibbons, or Michel to determine what you really have. Let's take a step back and discuss how you can identify valuable 2-cent Washington stamps. First, check the centering. A well-centered stamp with full, even margins and no off-edge design is significantly more valuable. Next, examine the gum on the back. Unused stamps with original gum and no hinge marks are referred to as mint never hinged, or MNH, and these are usually worth 2 to 10 times more than their hinged or used counterparts. Then, determine whether the stamp has a watermark. Watermarks like the double-line USPS or single-line USPS were used inconsistently across different printings and can make a major difference in value. If you're unsure, consider sending your stamp for professional certification. Organizations like the Philatelic Foundation, Professional Stamp Experts, PSE, or American Philatelic Society, APS, can provide expert analysis and issue grading certificates, which add serious credibility when selling. Now, let's talk about the selling side of the stamp market in 2025. Where can you sell your valuable stamps, and how much can you expect to earn? If you've confirmed that your 2-cent Washington stamp is of a rare type, your best options are reputable auction houses such as Cherrystone Auctions, Siegel Auctions, or Spink USA. These houses specialize in philately and have a large base of international collectors who are willing to pay top dollar for high-grade items. If you're not looking to go through a traditional auction, platforms like eBay, Hipstamp, and Delcamp offer excellent visibility and allow you to set your own price. However, you should always research past sales to avoid overpricing or underselling your item. Be sure to include high-resolution scans, certification documents, and clear descriptions when listing your item. Photos showing perforations, watermarks, and back gum condition will drastically increase buyer trust and your chances of a successful sale. Another important consideration is market timing and investment potential. As we move further into 2025, collectible stamps continue to hold strong as alternative investment assets. With economic uncertainty, inflation, and a global search for non-digital investments, more people are turning to tangible, historical items, like stamps, for portfolio diversification. Rare stamps, especially those with historical significance like the George Washington issues, are now seen not just as collectibles but as long-term stores of value. This is especially true in Asia and Europe, where demand for classic US and British Commonwealth stamps is growing rapidly. So, if you're holding on to one of these pieces or thinking about investing in stamps, this may be the right time to get in, or cash out. In closing, the 2-cent red Washington stamp you see in front of you may be one of the most common stamps ever printed, but not all of them are created equal. In some cases, a small design difference, a tiny error, or a rare variation could mean the difference between a stamp worth 25 cents and one worth thousands of dollars. That's the thrill of philately. It's a treasure hunt where history and detail truly matter. If you found this information helpful and you want to continue learning about rare stamps, pricing trends, investment strategies, and fascinating postal history, be sure to like this video, subscribe to Stamps Old World UK, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a deep dive into the world of classic postage stamps. Share your discoveries and questions in the comments, and we may feature your stamp in our next video. Until next time, happy collecting, and remember, every stamp tells a story, and some are worth far more than meets the eye.